Okay, quality measurement. Notice as far as measuring, we have inspection and testing. The reason we talk about inspection and testing, this is from a ASCE report years ago, or not, 7 years ago. But look at the causes of failure. And that's why I was mentioning workmanship to you before. So the question is, if I'm mentioning workmanship and your specs does not address workmanship, that may want to be something you want to look at. And if your specs imply workmanship, you may want to ask to see how it's actually being administered out in the field to meet the intent of your requirements. Okay, inspection components can be a variety of things that you may need to look at to make sure that they meet your like for equipment backup alarms on trucks. Want to try to avoid backing up over people, which past couple of years that's been a rising number nationally, so be careful there, especially with your workers on site, and or moving traffic. Moving traffic doesn't seem to be that much, but if you're actually out there, you can quickly not even hear the backup alarm sometimes. I've had two of my friends with Caltrans that had gotten killed in the past 20 years because they got backed up by a loader. Inspection attributes. Okay, things to think about. Again, tying back to the three-legged stool. Design, build, quality control, and agency acceptance are the two main attributes throughout your program. Again, highlighting acceptance inspection, just how do you do it? Well, it depends what the material and product is you're looking at, which rolls into like the third bullet. What are the materials and what is the level of workmanship to make it happen? An example I gave you was the honeycombing for the concrete. This is just trying to show for different materials, different parts of the product that you may want to pick off to dig into a little bit more as far as cleanliness for a product, the temperature, say the dimensions, surface defects. I suspect your specs all have something that may call out certain pieces of that table. Acceptance, sampling, and testing approaches. Notice in this case it's pointing out that you don't want to have your state acceptance testing not to provide data for QC control. Again, the contractor needs to be made responsible, self-police their own products. Okay, when you talk about frequency, a couple approaches. Use only agency acceptance or include validated design, build, or test data. That's where Federal Highways in 2005 created a technical advisory related to using contractors' material tests for states' acceptance tests. This is an example, give you an idea what it looks like. Got a mat, you got the samples. Do the split samples from the state, take the test. Now you need to validate them. Still have the 3 referee samples in case there's discrepancies and appeal needed. Take the 2 and you want to validate them. See if they compare. So that's what our technical advisory talks about, using contractors' tests. State does their test, matching up, see if they're correlated, and see if they're within your tolerance that you may or may not want to allow. Okay, talking about criteria and warranties. Sound like you guys really didn't use warranties, but so just something to think about if you eventually evolve to that. There is some criteria that needs to be used for federal highways. As far as key points, QA is an umbrella term. Recognized design builder, again, contractor quality control, 3-legged stool, they're one of the 3 requirements. However, there are some states that have a contractor do their own QA on just the contractor side of the house. And for those that do that, they seem to run into a lot less disagreement on the state's QA side of the house. Okay, the agency is responsible for acceptance. Agency is responsible for independent assurance. swinging back to the first couple slides I showed you a couple hours ago. Okay, documentation work in progress, and we're getting close to the end here. Monitoring the work, over the shoulder reviews, talk about progress payments, DBE goals. Monitoring the work, again, recognize you'll have the contractor's QA program, design QA program, construction QA program, materials QA program. Think of over the shoulder review, figure out your time and criteria, who all do you want involved, what's the process, try to do it in a timely fashion. Again, with NCRs, figure out if you want to have milestones to the point where, example I gave you, would you let the contractor pour on rebar that hasn't been blocked off the ground, or say unoiled or wetted forms? Again, those are decisions you need to make, because to the point, if something goes wrong and you need correction, it may be a little tough to get the contractor to see it from your viewpoint. Then we get into the critical path method for the schedule. A lot of states with design build, from what I've seen, they ask for a more defined resource loaded schedule, which could be for personnel, could be for usage of DBEs out on the project. As it's a bigger project, and you're putting a lot more ownership on the contractor, but it's still a shared risk. That helps, should give you a little more comfort that as they say work with the DBE the first couple months, 6 months, that they're going to eventually meet their DBE goal. As an example, on the flip side, if you have environmental concerns, require that as part of their schedule submitted to you, just where those environmental commitments will be incorporated into that phase of work. In other words, don't assume if you want it, get it in there, and that's your line in the sand to help spot check the contractor that they're actually providing to what you ask them to do. And then we get into progress payment. Do you want to pay them monthly? Like on the San Francisco-Oakland Bay Bridge, $5 to $10 million checks were written every Friday because it was such a high cash flow, but that's a project that went from 1.6 billion to 7.2 billion in 2 to 3 years. So there's a little bit difference in the numbers. Talking about progress payments, like I think John mentioned a little bit earlier, talking about quantity we want to measure, and quality, make sure we meet the spec. If you're going to pay for it, do some spot checking to make sure that it's actually meeting the spec you're paying for. And again, with the NCRs, you may want to make a point that if it's an NCR, you don't pay for it, and or a portion of it, not the whole thing, till it gets corrected with the appropriate credit and or mitigation as applicable. Okay, level of documentation. Sounds like you're using Site Manager. Do you use electronic diaries too for recording day-to-day activity and force account stuff, equipment? Okay, so just recognize there, if it's hard copy versus electronic, assuming the contractor will have something similar, the better you can make their information compatible with your system and vice versa. That can make things a little bit smoother in a transference of information. Okay, so the phrase I tell everybody, if you see it, this goes for everybody involved in the projects. If you see it, say something about it. If you see it and say it, you need to fix it. And in because you're maybe an engineer, don't gold plate it necessarily. Make it legit. And when I say make it legit to meet your state requirements as well as the applicable federal highway requirements, whatever those may be that the division and the state have agreed to. That really can help with proper documentation of federal highways when we do our fire reviews and or field inspections. That kind of philosophy can really help cut down the risk of something being made ineligible or participating in part thereof.